On August 6, 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, a second bomb fell on Nagasaki. On August 15, Japan announced its surrender. The story most people know goes like this. The atomic bombs forced Japan to surrender, ending the Second World War and saving hundreds of thousands of lives that would have been lost in an invasion of the Japanese home islands. This story is not wrong, but it is incomplete, and the parts that are missing change the picture significantly. Because between the bombing of Hiroshima on August 6th and Japan's surrender announcement on August 15th, something else happened, something that most accounts of the war's end mention only in passing, if at all. On August 8th, 2 days after Hiroshima and 1 day before Nagasaki, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and launched a massive invasion of Japanese-held Manchuria. Within days, Soviet forces had shattered the Kwantung Army, Japan's largest land force, and were advancing rapidly toward the Japanese home islands. The question that historians have debated ever since is this: which of these two events, the atomic bombs or the Soviet declaration of war, was the decisive factor in Japan's decision to surrender? The answer is more complicated and more disturbing than the standard account suggests. To understand Japan's decision to surrender, you have to understand the position Japan was in by the summer of 1945 and the internal politics of the Japanese government that would make any decision to surrender extraordinarily difficult. By mid-1945, Japan's military position was catastrophic. The American island hopping campaign had brought U.S. forces to Okinawa, just 340 miles from the Japanese home islands. American submarines had devastated Japanese shipping, cutting off the supply of oil and raw materials that Japan's war economy depended on. American air raids, conventional ones, before the atomic bombs, had firebombed Tokyo and dozens of other Japanese cities, killing hundreds of thousands of civilians. Japan was losing. Everyone in the Japanese government knew it, but losing and surrendering are not the same thing. And for the Japanese military leadership, surrender was almost unthinkable. The Japanese military culture of the time placed an extraordinary value on fighting to the last. The concept of Bushido, the warrior's code, meant that surrender was considered shameful, almost literally worse than death. Japanese soldiers at Iwo Jima, Saipan, and Okinawa had fought to near total annihilation rather than surrender. The military leadership was prepared to call for a similar defense of the home islands, a strategy they called Ketsugo, in which every Japanese man, woman, and child would resist an American invasion. American military planners estimated that an invasion of Japan could cost between 250,000 and 1 million American casualties, and potentially millions of Japanese lives. President Truman had inherited the Manhattan Project, the secret program to develop the atomic bomb, from Franklin Roosevelt, who died in April 1945. Truman had not known about the project as vice president. When he was briefed after becoming president, he faced a decision that no leader had ever faced before. The bomb was not the only option. American planners had already been firebombing Japanese cities with devastating effect. A naval blockade was strangling Japan's economy. Some senior American officials, including Secretary of War Henry Stimson and several military commanders, believed Japan was already close to surrender and that the bomb might not be necessary. Others disagreed. They argued that Japan's military leadership would not surrender without a shock so massive and so unprecedented that it broke the deadlock within the Japanese government between those who wanted to seek peace and those who insisted on fighting to the end. Truman chose to use the bomb. He later said the decision was made to end the war quickly and save lives, both American and Japanese, that would have been lost in an invasion. This was almost certainly his genuine belief, but it was not the whole picture. The bomb fell on Hiroshima on August 6th. Between 70,000 and 80,000 people died immediately. By the end of 1945, the death toll would rise to somewhere between 90,000 and 166,000. The Japanese Supreme War Council met to discuss the situation, and here is where the standard account becomes complicated. The council was deadlocked. The military members, Army Chief of Staff Umezu and Army Minister Anami, insisted on continuing to fight, even after Hiroshima. They argued that the Americans had limited numbers of atomic bombs, that Japan could absorb the damage, and that a negotiated peace on Japanese terms was still possible if Japan could inflict enough casualties on an American invasion force. The civilian members, including Foreign Minister Togo, argued for seeking peace, but through the Soviet Union, which Japan still hoped might mediate a negotiated settlement. Japan had been making secret approaches to the Soviets, asking them to mediate with the Americans. What the Japanese government did not yet know was that the Soviet Union had already agreed at the Yalta Conference in February 1945 to enter the war against Japan within 3 months of Germany's defeat. Germany surrendered in May. The 3 months were almost up. On August the 8th, 1945, 2 days after Hiroshima, 1 day before Nagasaki, Soviet Foreign Minister Molotov summoned the Japanese ambassador and informed him that the Soviet Union was declaring war on Japan, effective immediately. The news arrived in Tokyo like a second shock, and for many historians, a more decisive one than Hiroshima. Japan's entire strategy for ending the war on acceptable terms had depended on the Soviet Union remaining neutral and potentially mediating a peace settlement. That strategy was now dead. The Soviets were not going to mediate, they were invading. The Kwantung Army, 1 million men, Japan's premier land force, stationed in Manchuria as the last major Japanese military reserve, was shattered within days. Soviet forces were advancing toward Korea and toward the northern Japanese island of Hokkaido. For the Japanese military leadership, which had been willing to absorb Hiroshima, the Soviet entry was a different kind of shock, the destruction of their last strategic option. Historian Tsuyoshi Hasegawa, whose research has most rigorously examined this question, concluded that the Soviet entry into the war was more decisive than the atomic bombs enforcing Japan's decision to surrender. His argument is that the Japanese military had been preparing for an American invasion and had convinced itself that the home islands could be defended, but had no plan for fighting both the Americans and the Soviets simultaneously, and no hope of negotiating a settlement with Soviet mediation now that the Soviets were an enemy. On August 9th, as Nagasaki burned and Soviet forces advanced through Manchuria, the Supreme War Council met again. It was still deadlocked. 3 for fighting, 3 for seeking peace. For the first and only time in the war, Emperor Hirohito was asked to break the deadlock. He chose peace. His reasoning, as recorded in his surrender rescript, is revealing. He cited both the atomic bomb and Japan's changing war situation, the latter being understood by Japanese officials at the time to refer to the Soviet entry. He did not cite the atomic bombs alone. The debate over what ended World War II is not merely academic. It has shaped and continues to shape how the atomic bombings are understood, justified, and remembered. If the bombs were the decisive factor, if Japan was about to fight to the last, and only the unprecedented shock of nuclear destruction could break the deadlock, then the decision to use them was a tragic but defensible act that saved more lives than it cost. If the Soviet entry was the decisive factor, or if Japan was already moving towards surrender through the Soviet mediation channel and the bombs accelerated a process that would have concluded anyway, then the calculation becomes more complicated. It means the bombs may have been used, at least in part, for reasons beyond ending the war quickly, including demonstrating American power to the Soviet Union at the dawn of the Cold War, and ending the war before Soviet advances could give Stalin a seat at the table in the post-war settlement of Asia. Truman knew the bomb would send a message to the Soviets. Secretary of State James Burns explicitly told him it would. Whether this was a reason for using it or merely a side effect is a question that historians have never fully resolved. The atomic bombs killed between 150,000 and 240,000 people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The Soviet entry into the war killed hundreds of thousands more in Manchuria. Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. What ended World War II was not a single event. It was a convergence of American nuclear capability, Soviet military power, Japanese political paralysis, and the particular moment when all three intersected in 9 days of August 1945. The standard story, the bomb ended the war, is not false, but it is a simplification of a decision that was made under enormous uncertainty, for reasons that were not purely military, with consequences that extended far beyond the immediate end of the fighting. History's most consequential moments are rarely as clean as the stories we tell about them. The further you look into what actually happened in those 9 days, the more complicated and the more human the picture becomes.